Joining us now is commentator and president and founder of Strelmark, Hilary Fordwich. Hilary, thank you so much for joining us. I want to start with the situation between Donald Trump and Volodymyr Zelenskyy. We've heard the rhetoric from Trump that Zelenskyy is a dictator and the US wants its money back. Well, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is expected to visit the White House tomorrow to meet with Donald Trump to finalise an agreement on critical minerals. Ukrainian officials have reportedly agreed to the terms of a final deal, which is set to compensate for the billions of dollars worth of wartime aid the European nation received from the US. Hilary, why has Zelenskyy come round to this deal?
Well, pleasure to be with you, Gabriella. And there's a plethora of reasons. I would say to all your viewers to read The Art of the Deal, because it gives you a very great grounding in terms of understanding President Trump. Of course, that was written many years ago before he was president. But The Art of the Deal basically lays out that you come in very forcefully, making demands and things that are really almost like off the charts, where you can actually come back and agree to something. So obviously Donald Trump started off from a very aggressive standpoint, but it's interesting, Gabriella, that Zelenskyy is flying to Washington, and actually today at his cabinet meeting, President Trump, when he was asked about it, he said, "Oh yes, I understand that he's coming," as if it's not that this is a big deal, that of course he would come and acquiesce to the deal. But what's very important about this, Gabriella, and particularly in contrast to the Biden administration, is the Biden administration basically just threw funds at the Ukraine without them being actually any agreement about repayment, where Europeans have actually given those as a loan. Interesting also is that Ukraine sits on about 5% of the world's rare earth minerals, such as iridium and all the things that go into cell phones, etc. So this is a really very wealthy nation in terms of its rare earth deals. So now, right to the bottom line, Zelenskyy is coming because then there will be peace. And this is something that Donald Trump has said, that on the campaign trail, just like Elizabeth said, your previous guest, he promises made, promises kept. He's doing everything he said he was going to do, and that includes peace in the Ukraine.
Yeah, it's absolutely extraordinary, isn't it, when you hear Donald Trump making those remarks, calling Zelenskyy a dictator, accusing Ukraine of starting the war, and then, within a week, Zelenskyy is making his way to the White House and he's going to agree to this minerals deal. What will it do for relationships between Ukraine and the US? And I suppose a lot of Americans would be really happy to see this deal through.
Yes, absolutely, because this is the American taxpayers' money going to Ukraine. And I know when a lot of Europeans say, Americans need to do this and that. I mean, could you imagine saying to the German taxpayer and the French taxpayer and the British taxpayer, you need to start supporting and paying for the defense of the US southern border? They'd be saying, what? Meanwhile, the US taxpayer is doing all this in the Ukraine. Now, to answer your question specifically about what this means to Americans, well, yes, not only will we have that money recovered, but what's very important to the Ukrainians, and this is another reason tying these 2 points together, why Zelenskyy is hopping on a plane and rushing over to see Donald Trump. It means with the US presence, with a mining deal, it means the US has an interest in preserving peace and protecting those mining fields in the Ukraine. So both parties absolutely win financially and in terms of keeping the peace.
It's incredible to see so much action being taken in just 5 weeks that Donald Trump has been back. And the White House is also making some changes, and I want your thoughts on them. The White House is welcoming new media into its press briefing room. So this includes some podcasters, potentially influencers, content creators. They'll be allowed inside the briefing room, alongside political reporters in a major shake-up. Take a listen.
But we will also be offering the privilege to well-deserving outlets who have never been allowed to share in this awesome responsibility. Just like we added a new media seat in this briefing room, legacy media outlets who have been here for years will still participate in the pool, but new voices are going to be welcomed in as well.
I think it's pretty reflective of the times that we're living in. So many people are just consuming their information through digital platforms. So I believe that this will only really strengthen communication and transparency. But do you have any concerns around this new strategy?
No, absolutely not, Gabriella. I think it's actually frightfully smart. Why? Yes, just to your point, which is the legacy media had become lazy. The legacy media was losing viewers. The legacy media was no longer representing the voice of the American public. And actually, credit goes to Baron Trump. I'm not sure if your viewers down there in Australia are aware of this, but Baron Trump was the urged his father to go on Joe Rogan with over 20 million listeners to his podcast. I think Donald Trump admitted that he'd never even heard really of Joe Rogan. All these modern podcasters, Gabriella, the world has evolved, the world has changed. And yes, it's absolutely appropriate that the voice of the American people is actually represented in the press room, and it's not just the lazy legacy media. And by the way, the legacy media did not serve their role as being the third state. They were not there as a third state. They were there as a form of left-wing propaganda. And there's a lot more I could add to that, because the USAID, all the discoveries about their funding, they were funding that left-wing legacy media, Gabriella, like the New York Times, like Politico, and that was actually meant that they could be biased because they were funded by the Democrats.
Such a scandal. It was unbelievable to see so much evidence of waste at USAID, and then that millions of dollars were going to outlets like Politico, you know, that were quick to dismiss the Hunter Biden report, his laptop story that was broken by the New York Post. I was the first to say that it was Russian disinformation. It really makes you question, you know, some of those outlets, that's for sure. I want to talk to you about what... Sorry, continue, Hilary.
Bought and paid for, we now know.
Well, to the UK now, Nigel Farage is favourably viewed by more people than any other political leader in Britain. That is according to a new poll. The Reform UK leader now sees his favourability sitting at 31%, which is higher than any of his party leader counterparts, including Sir Keir Starmer. He's sitting at about 21%. What do you put this down to?
Oh, Gabriella, where to start and where to stop? A number of things. First of all, just like in the US, the two-tier policing system, the double standards were not appreciated by the British public. And I think part of this happened with the murders that took place in Southport, where you saw people arrested rather than the perpetrators. That was a massive scandal. You've seen this net zero policy, which is absolutely ludicrous. The UK uses 0.003% of the world's resources, and you have countries like China that opened 84 new coal refineries. So the UK has been signed up to this policy, which was not something that the public ever wanted. So what you're seeing is the promises not kept by the Labour government. They had promised pensioners would have their heating bills lowered, little tactical things like this, Gabriella, whereas they've been increased. So two-tier care has two-tier policing system. They have not improved the lives of the average British person, and the double standards are not sitting well with the British public. And last but not least, I think Rishi Sunak was, if in America it's called Rhino, Republican in name only, Rishi Sunak was a conservative in name only. He led by globalist policies which failed the British public. That's why the Conservatives lost in the last election. It wasn't so much a vote for Labour, it was a vote against the Conservatives. And now they're learning their lesson as a nation, because the Labour's policies aren't any better. In fact, they're driving millionaires out of the UK, and the UK's economy is plummeting.
And the momentum really does appear to be right behind Nigel Farage. Do you see that continuing?
Yes, absolutely. I think that he's a man of common sense. The difference, though, I will say, between Nigel and Donald Trump, he's not formally, you know, a very sort of a multi-millionaire successful businessman. But I think Nigel is smart enough that if and when he does become prime minister, he would be smart enough, Gabriella, to surround himself, looking at what's happening in the US, with the sort of people that Donald Trump, people that run businesses, people who, a nation, I've always said we should have an amendment to the US Constitution, which is you should not be able to have public office until you've made payroll. If you've run a business, you know how to run a business. These politicians, Gabriella, and the Labour government, not one of them has actually run a business. So they don't understand how a nation works. No government has any money. They have zero money. They have your money, my money, they have the taxpayers' money. And that's what Nigel understands. And I think he could bring some common sense to the UK, just like it's happening in.
Yes, it'd be so interesting to see what happens. Look, I have to speak to you about the royals. There are reports that Meghan Markle had been dropped by her Hollywood agency, WME, but an industry insider claimed that Meghan Markle was let go because she was too demanding and too difficult to work with, and she's not the first person who's said that. The agency denies this, though, and says that it is still working with Meghan Markle. So, look, speaking about the dramas that seem to just surround Meghan, what's your assessment looking at the Sussexes and then also looking at the royal family? Why are they branded and perceived so differently?
Well, Gabriella, I always say that a tiger doesn't change its stripes. Somebody that has look at people's track record. In business, there's an expression, past performance predicts future productivity. Well, look at her past performance. She dumped her nation. She dumps her friends. She's dumped more than one husband. She dumped her own father. And then when she married Harry, she dumped the royal family. I think it's universally despised to air your dirty laundry. I don't think it's like in Australia appreciated any more down in Brisbane than it is in Brighton or it is in Boston. It is universally despised, Gabriella. So you don't disparage other people. That's rule number one. Then branding wise, she and I call him Harry the hypocrite, when they went to Canada, I don't know if you remember, but there was the photograph of Harry. He was holding Archie in a sort of like a rough everyday hat by a lake, grinning ear to ear. And I remember thinking at the time, and I had covered their wedding in Windsor. I do a lot of royal coverage, thinking, you know what? It's not what we all wanted. It's what they want. And they're going to live this quiet life by a lake. All right. That's what they said they wanted. And then Gabriella, Harry the hypocrite and his wife went to Hollywood, hired 3 PR agencies, and look at almost everything they've done. It's been hypocritical. Yes. The public doesn't like hypocrites. Find me the Australian who says, oh no, I really love hypocrites. Actually, this is the issue. People keep asking me about their branding, and I say a brand needs to be authentic. For example, this whole new show that she has about this jam. Gabriella, is there anyone in all of Australia who thinks she's actually making that jam herself? Absolutely not. We all know that refined sugar anyway is bad for you, causes you to gain weight and causes cancer. One thing I'll say about her, she is very slim and attractive. Her brand would be authentic if she taught everybody how to be as slim, because Americans spend billions on diets every single year. Instead, this jam that she's not even making herself. So it doesn't surprise me to hear from this agency, whether it's true or not. I think they're covering themselves actually at the moment until they decide actually what to do publicly. Yes. But everywhere she goes, people have said she was bullying. And Jason Knauf was just interviewed, of course, by 60 Minutes in Australia. And I covered this for Fox Business here in the US. Her bullying reputation follows her everywhere she goes, Gabriella.
Yes, absolutely. It's interesting when you're looking at what Meghan Markle and Prince Harry are up to. Meanwhile, King Charles and Queen Camilla have been filmed packing dates that will be sent to hospitals as they take part in pre-Ramadan celebrations at a restaurant in London. You know, the difference is so stark. How's this being received by people in the UK?
Well, yes. I mean, they're there to serve. That's what the royal family has done and done so well. And in contrast, look at Prince William and look at Kate Middleton, not trying to be celebrities, not trying to garner the spotlight at any regard. They are there to serve. And that's something that, thank goodness, Prince William is the one that is going to be the future king, because he understands the demands of duty and he's dedicated to the public. And that's what if one's lucky, one has in a royal family.
Hilary Fordwich, the president and founder of Strelmark, thank you so much for joining us on Power Hour. It's been brilliant to speak with you.
Pleasure. Absolutely, Gabriella.